Well, good afternoon, guys, and today I'll be talking about one of the most popular wildflowers in Utah, the state flower, in fact, Calochortus nuttallii, commonly known as the Sego Lily. Now, the genus Calochortus is a true symbol of not just Utah, but the western United States, being found all throughout the region and nowhere else with the exception of adjacent parts of Canada as well as Mexico. That being said, most species are restricted only to the west coast states, with the majority only being found in California, where the genus likely evolved. There are some, however, that have a distribution in the more interior western states, and none have so broad a distribution as the Sego Lily, which is found in areas centered on Utah, Wyoming, eastern Montana, and adjacent counties. It's a little hard to explain, so I'll put a range map up, but within this general range, you can find it in sunny valleys and mountainsides that are semi-arid to arid, sort of like this site we have here. Not exceptionally arid, though. You won't find it in the truly dry deserts, just more like the sagebrush, mountain brush, and pinyon juniper habitat. Now, the Sego Lily is fairly easy to identify due to a unique feature of the genus Calochortus, but most lilies have two whorls of three petals that are almost identical in appearance, thus being termed tepals by botanists. The genus Calochortus has two whorls that are quite different from each other, with the outer whorl, technically the sepals, being smaller, thinner, and sort of linear in shape, which you can see here. That red thing I'm holding is one of the sepals. Meanwhile, the inner whorl, the true petals, are larger and look more like typical flower petals. And when you look at them from above, they frequently cover up the sepals, giving the plant the appearance of having just 3 tepals instead of 6. The genus also has a superior ovary and matures into a 3-chambered capsule. This is common amongst many lilies, but just keep it in mind anyways. Now, specific to the Sego Lily, the plant has upright instead of nodding flowers, with petals that are generally white in color, though the inner ones will be yellow at the base, with a band of deep magenta just above that we can see here. That being said, in certain areas you may find some that are tinged pink, yellow, or even lilac. Just make sure it's not a species of Calochortus, but is one of those colors as a rule. Always consult the keys, not just my videos. There are like 60 species, so if you want to be precise, you have to know what the keys say. Now, looking beyond the flower, the plant has long, thin, linear leaves that look like blades of grass, growing both at the base as well as on its thin, spindly stem. See here one of the basal leaves, which is looking a little dry because the plant is just getting ready to finish up for the year, as well as one of the stem leaves, which isn't quite as long as the basal ones, but still fairly long. It still looks like a blade of grass. Now, keeping all these features in mind as well as the geographic range, it should be easy to get a solid ID for this plant as long as it's in bloom, which tends to be late spring, early summer. Well, that is specific to whatever elevation you're at. In a given area, throughout its entire elevation range in that area, it can be in bloom from early May to late July, though only in bloom briefly at each specific elevation, with that time getting later in the year as you go higher up, obviously. Here it tends to just be early June that it's in bloom. Now, the Sego Lily is a member of the true lily family, Liliaceae, which before genetic phylogeny was considered to be a rather large and sprawling plant family. Depending on the author, it could include virtually any monocot with showy flowers that was not an orchid. Botanists generally knew this was overly broad and tried to break it up a little bit, but they had no idea exactly how to and disagreed until genetics showed them the way. Since then, many genera formerly placed in the family have been moved elsewhere, and it now contains only about 600 species across 15 genera. Some of the more notable ones are Tulipa, the tulips, Erythronium, the trout lilies, and Fritillaria, the fritillaries. Meanwhile, some of the large recipients of other genera from the family include Amaryllidaceae, which also includes onions, Melanthiaceae, which is highly toxic, and perhaps the biggest victor of all, Asparagaceae, which includes Lilinas, and agaves, which, agaves used to be considered lilies by botanists. Now for the question I'm sure many of you guys are wondering, is this plant edible? And the answer is yes. I believe one of the reasons this plant is a state flower of Utah has to do with its use by the early Mormon pioneers as a source of forage. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that many lilies are toxic, and though this one's easy to identify, some others are not. So just when you're foraging lilies, you always want to be careful. I say lily in a very broad sense, not in the sense of the family Liliaceae, because you kind of have to treat them like that. Even though they're different families, very hard to tell apart by amateurs, and you can make some really big mistakes if you're just going off the family. So keep that in mind. Not a part you want to eat is the bulb. The bulb is just a modified bunch of leaves that are used to store energy, and the best time to forage this plant is earlier in the year. Right now it's used up a lot of its sugar to build the starchy stem and flower, so it's not going to be nearly as sweet or nutrient rich. So I'm just sorry, it's a bad time to do it. Just try again next year, I guess. Keep in mind also that when the plant first starts to emerge from the ground, that's the easiest time to mistake it for another more toxic plant, like maybe a Toxicoscordion, which I just saw up here. I mean, they don't look bad alike, but if you never know, you always want to be careful. Keep in mind also other animals want to eat this plant, and the plant has its own worth, and obviously harvesting it is going to kill it. And this plant is a perennial. It grows back every single year, so it'll end its long life if you do that. So maybe just consider growing them if you want to try them out. My advice if you do that is just to make sure the soil is dry in the summer, because again, they all evolved in California, so they don't handle wet summers very well. And make sure also it's just in a most partially shaded but preferably very sunny area. Thanks for watching and see you next time.